So hello, everybody. Welcome again to this month's Blue Hill Avenue Transportation Action Plan community meeting. We're very excited to have you all here with us today. Thank you for spending your time with us. Recordings of our past monthly Zoom meetings and all other project materials can be found at boston.gov/Blue Hill Avenue. That includes recordings of every presentation that are uploaded on YouTube and also PDF copies of all presentations as well. So as we do, we like to start with our project goals. For some of you, you've seen this before, but we always like to assume we're reaching new people each month. So the first goal for this project is to improve pedestrian safety along Blue Hill Avenue. Almost everybody is a pedestrian at some point. And so this is the baseline need for the corridor for a project moving forward, according to the City of Boston. Goal number 2 is to expand transportation options and reliability. One thing that we've heard consistently throughout the project thus far is that people don't feel like they can travel safely and reliably on Blue Hill Avenue by any mode. And so we want to make sure we are addressing those issues and also expanding the freedom of choice people have and how they choose to travel. And then goal number 3 is to connect infrastructure investments that will happen on this corridor to the work of other city departments and state agencies. And you'll see a very good illustration of that tonight because we will be hearing from our colleagues at the Mayor's Office of Housing. So elaborating a bit more on what tonight's meeting goals are, the first goal is to let folks know where this project came from, who was involved, and why this engagement process is different than some other city projects you may have been involved in. The second goal is to provide some updates about the planning studies and engagement activities we've been doing thus far. Goal number 3 is to respond to common questions that we're hearing about Blue Hill Avenue's Transportation Action Plan. We'll highlight one of those today. The fourth goal is to share project updates about related initiatives along Blue Hill Avenue. And then goal number 5 is to provide an overview of upcoming engagement and how to get involved. And I will ask that Shavella hop on to do the ground rules.
Thank you, Kirsty. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shavella Lee Pacheco, and I'm the co-founder of Consult Lila. We're supporting this process by supporting the youth engagement of this. We like to start off all of our meetings just with some ground rules. Planning can be a very contentious conversation. And so we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page of some expectations. The first is just to maintain respect for others in this space, for the city, for consultants, but also for community members. You know, different people have different experiences. So we ask that you maintain respect for yourself and for each other in the chat. The second is to please use I statements, just so that we can hear what your experience is. If you are representing a neighborhood association or group, please just share which group you are speaking on behalf of when you say we. Our third ground rule is just to step up and step back. That's something we use with the young people. So if you're not really sharing your experience much, please just step up, share, whether that's in the chat or coming off of mute. And if you are someone who we've heard a lot from, if you wouldn't mind just taking a step back, we do want to hear from everyone and everyone's experience with Blue Hill Ave. And the fourth is that we are being very intentional about having time at the end of these meetings to hear from community, to allow you to make comments, ask questions, and share reactions. So just wanted to share that with you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Shavella. Okay, so tonight's agenda. First, we will do a brief overview so you can meet the team, get oriented to the project, and we'll review the public commitments that we debuted last month. Then we'll respond to a common question we hear, which is, what is the approach to parking? After that, we'll hear some from the Mayor's Office of Housing about housing projects and initiatives going on along Blue Hill Avenue. And finally, we'll end with how to get involved and then some discussion time. So first, as we do, we like to do an introductory poll. So I am going to, oh, Thank you, Jeff. So this first poll is just to get a sense of who's in the room. So if you could let us know, what is the main way you travel along Blue Hill Avenue? So when you're on Blue Hill Avenue, how are you traveling most often? If you want to, you can tell us a bit about why that's your main way of getting around, and then the home zip code as well, so we can see kind of if we have residents, if we have other folks joining us tonight. And if you can't get the poll to work, please feel free to post those responses in the chat. And I'll give a couple seconds for people to do that. All right, we still have responses trickling in. It's looking like mostly folks who drive, but we definitely have representation from all of the other modes as well. If we haven't heard from you yet, just a couple more seconds. Great. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for answering the poll. It looks like we've got about 63% of people drive, 20% of folks take the bus or train, 10% bike, 5% walk, and 2% indicated other. If you want to let us know the other, I'm very intrigued. So great. Thanks, everyone. You can see those results here too. Oh, wonderful. Thank you for the context in the chat. Perfect. Okay. So moving into the first part of our meeting tonight, meet the team, project overview, and public commitments. So this is the public sector side of the Blue Hill Avenue Transportation Action Plan engagement team. You'll see that it's being led by myself and my colleagues Maya and Charlotte at the Boston Transportation Department. But we are not alone in this work. We are being supported by many other city departments, including all of the ones you see here. And we are continuing to add people onto this project to make sure, first of all, that we are coordinating our efforts across each other, from the basics like making sure we don't overlap meetings to deeper coordination in terms of sharing feedback and information, co-presenting like we will tonight, and trying to make sure that wherever people are able to plug into what's going on in their communities, that information is getting shared as widely and as relevantly as possible. We're also supported by our state partners on this work. So here's a list of folks that we speak with at least weekly, I would say, about this project. So that includes folks from both MBTA's capital delivery and transit priority teams, as well as Ben Mueller, who helps make sure we're coordinated with the Massachusetts Department of Transportation in Boston. And I will pass it off to Stephen to introduce the engagement team.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Stephen Gray, and I'm one of the consultants with Grayscale Collaborative. You can see that there's a kind of a range of consultants that's working with the city: Grayscale Collaborative, Powerful Pathways, Tool Design Group, Consult Leela, and Real Talk for Change with Caesar McDowell. And so we all bring different expertise, different backgrounds, different levels of connection with the community. For instance, Shavella and Alenza actually live in Mattapan, and so they're consulting from within and helping to sort of steer the process as well. We have community partners, which you can see on the right, the top right. This is a list of folks that we meet with every week. There are many more folks that we do communicate with on a more of a monthly basis or bi-monthly basis, which you can see at the bottom. But so far, the community partners that we are meeting with on a weekly basis are Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition, Greater Mattapan Neighborhood Council, Morning Star Baptist Church, Mattapan Square Main Streets, and Garrison Trotter Neighborhood Association. And of course, we're meeting with our clients and our collaborators every day, Boston Transportation Department and the Boston Planning and Development Agency. And Kenya joins our meetings every week as well. So we're making sure that we're connected to the BPDA in a very consistent way. This engagement team is, I think, unique to a lot of the ways in which engagement happens in Boston. Everyone on this team are fully engaged and are helping to steer the conversation. So when we're meeting on a weekly basis, it's the community voices, community leaders that are really helping to define the weekly agenda. And then the agenda that we bring to bear in these monthly updates and these monthly calls. So this team is, I think, really been great to work with, and we'll continue to work with you throughout this engagement period of the process. Next slide. Alensa.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alensa Michelle, and as Stephen said, I'm the founder and principal of Powerful Pathways, resident and an urban planner and placemaking artist. We've been pretty busy in trying to get the word out with this process and connecting the dots around the many different things that are happening around Blue Hill Avenue. Just to name a few, we're trying to, as Kirsty said, make sure that we're building cross connections across city agencies, which means that we're keeping tabs on a number of these other projects that are taking place, like the Franklin Park Master Plan, the Plan Mattapan process, the Cummins Highway Redesign Project, the Grove Hall Plaza Mural Initiative through the Office of Arts and Culture, Public Works projects, expanding bike share, neighborhood slow streets initiatives, and activities regarding the Fairmount line and connecting major corridors. So lots going on, and we want to make sure that this project is continually informing those other initiatives, as well as those initiatives informing this project. Next slide, please. So where are we now? Well, there's been a lot of different types of engagement activities that we have been doing. We've been holding a number of workshop sessions with community-based organizations and civic associations. We've had thus far 20 public meetings about Blue Hill Avenue and Madison Square, and that's going all the way back to 2019 when this project was first building up. 11 in-person pop-ups, 3 community walks, 1 mailer that was sent out to 23,000 homes, and these are the homes and spaces that are within a half-mile radius of the roadway, and over 500 survey responses, with more to coming in. In the works are also, we're in the process of developing a series of focus groups with neighborhoods. We're working and doing a number of outreach with faith-based groups as well. And that again is continuing. We're developing a business survey to engage the small businesses along Blue Hill Avenue, and that's happening closely with the Office of Small Business Development. We're also in conversation with the Office of Housing, and they'll share a little bit more, and the BPDA, and they'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. And just to kind of give a picture of context, you know, we're doing this work very differently. Just the makeup of the outreach team, the community engagement team, and how we're doing outreach, I should say, is very different. We're taking a very holistic approach because we're recognizing that this is not just about transportation. We're talking about public realm, we're talking about housing, we're talking about business, we're talking about access in a variety of ways. So we want to make sure that folks are aware that we're really looking at this from a big picture lens in a very practical way. Next slide, please. So a few commitments. One is the city and the engagement team are committed to making informed, data-driven decisions which respond to questions raised by the public. We continue to collect questions. We've so far collected over 100 questions from our public meetings about the project and helping to shape the overall vision. And commitment number 2, the city and engagement team are committed to providing pedestrian safety along Blue Hill Avenue. One of the major things we hear about is not simply just about traffic congestion, but also as pedestrians, people are having difficulty making connections from crossing the street, the location of crosswalks, the conditions of the road is something that we want to make sure is accessible to everyone, all persons, both able-bodied and otherwise. Commitment number 3, the city and engagement team believe that the public funding for this project should be allocated based on public priorities. This is tantamount. I think there's a lot of public perception about the city doing things based on an existing agenda. And that's completely understandable because there was a time in history where stuff like that would happen. Again, we are a very unique and different team working closely with the city with the intention of doing this differently and wanting to focus this project around what the public identifies as priorities. So you may hear throughout this process of this session and in other sessions and in past sessions, when people say things like, we don't want this, we might turn around and say, well, then what do you want? We want folks to be as clear and concise as possible in describing what changes you would like to see in the community along Blue Hill Avenue. Next slide, please. An example of some of the unique ways we are engaging the public and connecting with key stakeholders is we've been working closely with the MBTA to collect feedback from bus operators. And that's something that almost rarely ever happens, but we have to take into account that a lot of the bus operators are also folks who live and work in this community. So just a few things that we've heard, and there'll be more collection over time. We'll have more to share on the different types of interviews and focus groups that we'll be holding in the near future. But just to share a few with you, some quotes we got are, I used to go home with a tension headache, a pounding in my forehead. I don't pick up bus routes on Blue Hill Avenue anymore. I pick up the SL4, SL5 instead. So this was a bus operator that talked about some of the challenges and the difficulties of how being a driver along the Route 28 bus and the stress that it caused. Another quote is, center running bus lanes on Blue Hill Avenue are the only way it will work. Otherwise, bus lanes won't be respected. I love the Columbus bus lanes. And again, this is from their perspective as a bus operator. Pulling into bus stops is really hard. People don't understand that blocking the bus stop makes it hard to serve riders with disabilities. Next slide. And passing it back to Kirsty.
Thank you, Alyssa. So as we said, we like to at each of these meetings respond to some of the common questions that we're hearing from folks. And so this time we are talking about what is the plan for parking. We've received a lot of questions about parking, so I want to assure everybody that the discussion today is just the beginning of a much larger and more in-depth discussion about parking, where we'll literally be talking with business owners, with the abutters, so people who live along Blue Hill Avenue and others, about each block and sort of how much street space we have, what the trade-offs are, those sorts of things. But today we wanted to give you all sort of a high-level overview of how the city approaches parking as a framework for those future conversations moving forward. So the first thing that we wanted to talk about today is that as city employees, we think about parking availability. So how likely is it that I'll be able to find a parking spot when and where I need it? And that's a combination of two different things. So of course, the number of actual spaces on the street is a factor. But then the other factor actually is the number of people who can use each space per day. So we have a bit of an example here. If you have 8 parking spots in front of the businesses that you see at the bottom of your screen, and each of those are marked as, your standard 2-hour parking spots. What that means is that in a typical business day, so 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 12 hours, 48 cars maximum, or at a minimum, use those spots if everybody's staying there for 2 hours. However, if you actually try to match the parking time limits to the businesses that they're next to. So let's say there's a convenience store and people are usually doing quick trips, you know, running in to grab something, but quickly going back to their car. What we can do is offer something like 15-minute parking there. And so when you start to do those more strategic timed parking regulations, we see that in spots 1 to 6, 36 cars can be there, but in spots 7 and 8 from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., you could have up to 96 cars that are able to park there and use those stores for quick pickup drop-off needs. And so we'll be talking with folks a lot about that. And that's a key element of the business survey that you heard Lensa mention, which is how long do people typically spend in your store? You know, how many people are you receiving per hour? Are there areas where it might be helpful to have a pickup drop-off zone / a loading zone so that a delivery truck could also use it? Things of that nature. And so we wanted to present this sort of framework to you all today so that you can start thinking about that too as you travel Blue Hole Avenue and think about, you know, what would you like to see and where? We are also looking into the availability of other parking resources near Blue Hole Avenue. So not just the on-street spaces that we'll be studying, but also how well used the 3 municipal parking lots are. So we will be doing parking studies in these areas to take a look at how many streets are typically available at different times, you know, what we call turnover rate looks like. So how long are people parking there for, and those sorts of things to make sure that we are using our parking resources as best as possible. And so we have another poll. Jeff, would you like to launch the poll?
Great. So the poll is specifically about parking, and the computer will let you type in choose as many of the concerns as you want. And we know that people may have a lot, but what we're hoping to is for you to get just the top 2 concerns so that we can get a sense of your most important concerns. So we're going to launch that poll. And hopefully we had about 30 people participate at the first one. So we're hoping to get closer to the 50 people, 55 people that we have. All right, so we're a little over half of everybody. All right, now you don't want to be the one left behind that they didn't answer. All right, there's a couple more. All right, great. So I think if I click this, so double parking seems to be a lot of people's concerns, although I think, as someone mentioned in the chat, there's a reason for why people are doing it. And so the question just is, how do we think through that and the alternative use of that space? So I hope people can see the results. When I took my kids roller skating a couple of weeks ago, definitely some double parking going on Blue Hole Avenue, which I think everyone agrees to. But if that is the necessary reason for parking, then we need to best understand that. Availability of parking among the top concerns, and parking enforcement is another. So hopefully this gives you a flavor of what people in the room are thinking. And I'll pass it back to Kirsty to pass it to Julio.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. So for now, we are going to pass it to our colleagues over at the Mayor's Office of Housing to present a bit about housing initiatives, projects, programs along the Blue Hole Avenue corridor. And then at the end, we'll talk a bit about how both of these topics are intricately interrelated, actually. So with that, Julio, I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, Kirsty, and good evening, everyone. And thank you to the BTD team and everyone that's been doing so much work along the corridor. My name is Julio Pillar. I'm a housing development officer with the Mayor's Office of Housing. Some of you may have seen me throughout our engagement process for our Blue Hill Avenue initiative, which is mainly focused on housing. But as has been said, there has been a lot of cross-agency collaboration throughout this process and over the last couple of years, going back to 2019 before we went through the pandemic. So what I want to do is I just want to give you a quick overview of the MOH's Blue Hill Avenue Action Plan, and also to give an update on where we are. So if you've been following us along, you might be familiar with some of these slides, but we have made a lot of, I would say, progress since we started this, and are now making developer designations to create affordable housing and affordable commercial spaces along the corridor. So this this aerial view is just a map of the 4 parcel groups that we have on Blue Hill Avenue. So our office essentially did an inventory on the city-owned parcels along the corridor. And we decided that we were going to break those groups up into 4 different groups, not only for because there's different neighborhoods and you have different needs as you move through the corridor, but also because we just understood that it would be easier for folks to engage in the conversation if we were focusing on particular neighborhoods while also looking at the project holistically. So the B1 parcels are mostly in Mattapan and the council district 4 and 5. So this is, I would say, north of Mattapan Square, right up until right before you get to the Boys and Girls Club. So the B2 parcels are closer to the Boys and Girls Club, and that's actually near Franklin Park. And then B3 is mostly located in the Grove Hall section of the corridor in Roxbury. And then lastly, B4 is along the stretch of the corridor after Grove Hall, but before the Dudley Triangle. Most of the parcels are located in the Moore Industry Historic District. Next slide, please. So we started with 30 parcels. And again, these parcels are across Mattapan, Dorchester, and Roxbury, and totaling approximately 97,000 square feet of land. Most of these parcels are small, with the exception of a couple of parcels that were on the larger side. So I would say the average parcel is about 3,000 to 5,000 square feet, with a couple of the parcels being on the larger end, between 10 and 11,000 square feet. There are a couple of different council districts that are covered throughout this project. And one thing we did was, in addition to engaging the other agencies that were doing this work along the corridor, was also to reach out to the elected officials as well, so that we could work with their offices as much as possible on the planning and sort of gathering requirements and also talking about proposals. There was a change in the city council makeup as we were going through this. So we're trying to work with some of the newer councilors as much as we can, and hopefully in the near future, re-engaging folks for the parcels that have not been awarded thus far. There is a couple of different zoning uses in the corridor. Again, the zoning changes as you move through the different neighborhoods and different sections of the corridor. So we tried to be mindful of that while also trying to achieve the goals that we heard were important to folks. So as part of our engagement, we basically were walking up and down the corridor, talking to businesses, knocking on doors, dropping flyers, and doing walking tours and a lot of other engagement practices, doing surveys like Christy and the folks are doing tonight, but also just trying to get the word out so that folks knew what we were trying to do. And a lot of it was really to try to engage folks who had not been part of this before, including developers. There were efforts to develop some of these parcels in the past, going back to 2016, and even before that, there were some efforts as well in 2008, 2009 that did not move forward because of the financial crisis at the time. And then there were some other efforts that also happened under Menino. There was a Blue Hill Avenue initiative, I believe in the early 2000s, that resulted in Mecca and Grove Hall, and a lot of the Main Streets initiatives that came out of that as well. Next slide, please. So this is a timeline of our project. Again, similar to the BTD initiative, I think we were sort of a few months away when we started. So some of the very early efforts were to just meet with all the agencies that were either doing work on Blue Hill Avenue or planning to do work on Blue Hill Avenue. This was back in 2019. And then we quickly moved to a very involved community engagement process. We wanted to take our time and do it a little bit different from the previous efforts that were done. A lot of that came out of what we heard from folks. A lot of the neighborhood businesses were either being pushed out or had been there for 15, 20, 30 years in some cases, renting. So they were at risk of being pushed out. So we were trying to not only create affordable housing, which is what our agency focuses on, but also affordable commercial spaces for folks to either start new businesses or expand their businesses. And then we continue to do that through 2020. We know all the challenges that we experienced during that time with COVID. I think in a way, these virtual meetings were helpful to us because they did allow for more engagement. And I think folks were able to join these meetings, where they were cooking or taking care of their kids or, all the things that they could do that they previously weren't able to do. And I think we did get a better outcome because of that, as bad as COVID has been. We issued our first RFP in the spring of 2021. This was for the 10 parcels in the Mattapan section of the corridor. Out of that, we actually designated a couple of developers for 8 of the 10 sites. We are working with them now and hoping to close on those before the end of the year. And that'll lead to affordable homeownership, affordable rental, affordable commercial spaces along the corridor. And we're very excited about that. We've also been working closely throughout this process with neighborhood organizations and elected officials, our partners and dealer agencies, and stakeholders in the neighborhood. The second RFP that we issued was in the spring of 2022, and that was for 18 parcels on the B3 and B4 parcel group. And we actually also just finished designating developers for 10 of those 18 sites that we put out, and that will also lead to open space, which we're very excited about. There's going to be open and green space on Blue Hill Avenue as part of this. We're also creating affordable homeownership and again, affordable commercial spaces along the corridor. And we're also, because we just designated those development teams for those sites, we're actually going to be working very closely with them and the neighborhood groups on the design, furthering those designs, addressing concerns. And then ultimately, we hope that those projects will close sometime in early 2024. So our efforts right now are going to be focused on one, helping those teams that we designated, but then looking to the future of, we still have a number of sites that were not designated. So the B2 parcel group, we have not put out an RFP for, so those will be going out hopefully in this next package, along with everything else that we have not designated. I think the goal will be to re-engage the community, figure out what the best uses will be, make sure we're still on the same page, but also maybe looking at things a little bit different. We noticed that some of the smaller sites were not generating the interest that we thought we would be getting. So I think maybe we have an approach where we look at small sites and big sites and figure out what the best way to develop those sites or dispose of those sites will be. So we will be doing engagement in the spring. And I would say stay tuned for that, and you can reach out to me or our office with any questions on that. But we'll start that re-engagement process. Next slide, please. So I will now hand it off to my colleague Antonio, who I believe is on the call to talk about Welcome Home Boston.
Yes, good evening. Hopefully everyone can hear me. My name is Antonio Leish. I'm also with the Mayor's Office of Housing. I am a senior development officer who've actually just recently joined the office, but I am super excited to be here tonight to let everyone know of an upcoming opportunity that we have at the Mayor's Office of Housing geared towards affordable home ownership. As you may have noticed or have heard, Mayor Wu has publicly made a commitment and has also allocated federal funding that we've received from the American Rescue Plan Act to support this initiative. And we are at the Mayor's Office of Housing are taking and pushing that initiative forward as we are serious about making that commitment. So without further ado, if you haven't been introduced to, what you will hear going forward a lot of, we hope, is a program that we are calling Welcome Home Boston. This initiative, as mentioned, is going to help low to moderate income Bostonians become homeowners. We also will be supporting those homeowners with first-time home buyer assistance, and we will be constructing home ownership on city-owned lots as well. Next slide, please. So far, we have identified 150 parcels that we are committed to this Welcome Home Boston program. Out of those 150, we've identified about 70 parcels which span across Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury, which also coincide with some of the parcels that we have been looking at for the Blue Hill Ave initiative as well. So we are, with the Welcome Home Boston, we'll be taking a lot of the community survey and engagement inputs that we are gathering, and also using that as we pursue RFPs to address these parcels that we have available in and around the Blue Hill Ave area. Next slide, please. Based on community feedback, which we have gathered in the past, which we will continue to gather in this meeting and going forward as well in future community engagements. But so far, what we have gathered from respondents and feedback is that we are going to be maximizing the use of public land available to create homeownership opportunities, again, for low to moderate income home buyers. This program will also try to focus on providing family-sized units, which are 2+ bedrooms for those families that require that space to accommodate their families. We are also going to make sure that each proposal provides complementary open space where feasible. And also we will keep an eye on parking and when it's appropriate compared to the site context, and also access to transit. What you'll see on the bottom of this presentation slide is the potential sale prices that we are targeting for these 2 bedrooms to 3 bedroom home ownership opportunities. And we will be working with development or developer partners to ensure that we maintain these prices that we're looking for. Next slide, please. So in the spirit of community input, community survey, we encourage you to go to the Welcome Home Boston website, which you see linked here below. We have additional information, also an interactive mapping tool so that you can see where these sites are exactly. We have presentation slides, previous presentation slides that you can access and view. We also have a QR code here that you can also use to jump straight to the website as well. We do have a survey link there and also a sign up for any upcoming notifications. So if you're a developer or potential homeowner, please go to the website and sign up, and you will be getting notified with any future notifications. But I believe that's my time, so thank you.
So you want me to cover this real quick, Kirsty?
Yes, please. That would be great.
Okay, great. So this slide just covers general MOH contacts if you have any questions about the different programs. So if you want to get on a developer mailing list for future requests for proposals, if you have any questions about city-owned parcels, you have no ideas for projects, if you want to know more about the Welcome Home Boston, which Antonio just covered, these are the folks that you can contact. I will put my email in the chat as well. If you have any questions about the Blue Hill Avenue, the Housing Blue Hill Avenue initiative, you can contact me, and I'll drop a link to the project page, where you can also sign up for the mailing list as well. Next slide, please. So this I think this is our last slide, but this slide is different resources that MOH has. So our office also has a RFP portal, so you can find out which parcels we're trying to do land disposition on, or what funding we have available for housing or open space. Here's information on the HUD income limits, which apply to all of our programs. If you want to learn more about active developments, there's a website, Building Housing. It's a city website, which includes all of our projects. The Mayor's Office of Housing also has a home buyers and homeowners division, which is the Boston Home Center, and they provide resources for a number of different things. So if you want to take a home buying class, if you want to better your credit, if you want to get down payment and closing cost assistance, if you're a homeowner, they offer help with repairs and lead removal. And then there's also the Office of Housing Stability, which offers resources for renters and landlords, and that includes rental assistance or landlord disputes. They have a number of resources that are available as well. And then if you're looking for affordable housing, there's the Metro List, which you can sign up for, and they send out, I believe it's daily or weekly emails with rental properties and homeownership properties. And then lastly, the link for Welcome Home Boston, which Antonio just mentioned. But there's a number of different resources. I encourage you to take a look at the website and reach out to any of these departments. Thank you.
Thank you, Julio. And so as promised, really connecting what we just heard about and the discussion on parking earlier today to the work that we're trying to do on the Blue Hill Avenue Transportation Action Plan. So both of our teams are coordinating closely together because we know that housing and transportation are related. In fact, they're very intimately connected to each other. And so we are coordinating both, as you heard today, on new development and making sure that there's access to reliable and safe transportation options, whether that's walking, biking, transit, driving, and looking at how that impacts development opportunities and how new development in turn can impact the demand for different transportation options. So we will be making sure we keep an eye on all of that throughout this process. The other thing that we know we must coordinate on is housing affordability. We've heard from a lot of folks fears about gentrification. We know that large-scale public investments can impact the cost of housing. And so we are committed to working proactively together to address concerns of gentrification and displacement along Blue Hill Avenue. And we will continue to have that conversation with you all, and also to pursue actual studies of these risks with our partners at Mayor's Office of Housing and also at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, who specialize in this kind of thing. And so one thing I wanted to leave you all with is sort of how at a high level, we at the city think about the intersection between housing and transportation. And so we believe that housing development must plan for residents' transportation needs, no matter their age or ability. Those who drive, take transit, walk, and bike. The City of Boston believes that with the right coordination and planning, we can leverage new developments and transportation investments to create more affordable, safe, and reliable transportation options, including when it comes to parking access. So we are looking forward to continuing this conversation with those in this room and the many others who are not. As I said, this will not be the last time you hear from us about either of these topics. So we're excited to keep the conversation going.
And speaking of continuing the conversation and keeping things going, we want to sort of end before we open up for public comment and conversation with some information about ways that you can get involved, and hopefully you can inform your neighbors of ways that they can get involved as well. So one of the ways we want to highlight on the next slide is the upcoming Real Talks. So Real Talk for Change is a series of conversations, small group conversations, that is intended to focus on and amplify the voices of folks who, actually a lot of folks who probably aren't on this call today. If you remember that first poll, a large majority of people that have come to tonight's meeting and have come to many of the meetings through the process have identified as motorists. And one of the things we want to make sure that we balance out is the representation of people that are actually using Blue Hill Avenue, particularly during rush hour, which tends to be less than 50% motorists that are using it. And so we want to be reaching out to people that are taking public transportation, people that are walking, people that are using rideshare, other modes that are not so represented in this process is really where we're focusing. But we also want to focus on folks that that may also not have time for some of these meetings, and we can schedule around their schedules. So people that have children and families, seniors, youth, as we said, Consult Leela is particularly focused on youth activities, and that's the sort of one of the other things we want to highlight tonight. But the Real Talks are going to be starting actually this week. We have our first small group Real Talk, and we will be training some of the folks that join us for that to host and facilitate future conversations. Part of the idea of Real Talk is that it's conversations among residents and neighbors that is also led by residents and neighbors. And so we will be engaging in a number of these, quite a few of these, starting March 2nd and through the end of June. And so again, there's some of you indicated that you wanted to be involved or you were considering it in the last meeting. We'll have another poll to ask you again if there's any new folks here, if you are interested in being contacted and getting involved in other ways than just these monthly updates. And so Real Talk is, I think, going to be a really interesting and productive set of conversations. Next slide.
Great. I will speak on behalf of Consult Leela. So Consult Leela has a winter placemaking event coming up this Saturday. And yes, we're keeping an eye out on the weather. For the past 5 months, we've been working with 4 young people to plan this event as a way to get other individuals who are not normally in community meetings or more formal processes around giving input to come to this event and give input there. We will have free food, we will have a talent showcase, free games, as well as some art making activities and walk audits. And again, this is a winter placemaking event, so it's supposed to happen in the winter time. So we do hope to see you all there, weather pending.
And then I think we have one more slide, Kirsty, yes, with the poll and the other ways to get involved.
Yes, we do. So thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Chevelle, for talking about those exciting opportunities. I really do want to encourage everyone to come out to Mattapan Square this weekend, regardless of whether the youth committee that our partners at Consult Leela have been working with have some really exciting activities planned. It's completely youth-led, so it's a really great opportunity to lift up those voices and those members of our community. So many of you answered this last time. Thank you so much. If you did, you should have received an email from me today. If you didn't, feel free to chat me or respond here or elsewhere. But if you could, I'm going to ask that Jeff launches our last poll of the evening, which is just an opportunity to indicate whether you're interested in getting involved with other engagement activities for the Blue Hill Avenue Transportation Action Plan. If you'd answered last time, don't feel like you need to answer again. You're welcome to, though. If you'd like to reaffirm or change your answer, we'll make sure that we look at that. Wonderful. Great. Same as last time, this group of folks, it looks like, are really interested in getting involved, and we really deeply appreciate that on this team. We really do want this to be a community-focused, community-led process, and that can't happen without you all. So thank you so much. I'll leave that poll open for just a couple more seconds while I talk about some of our upcoming activities. So As Stephen mentioned, we'll be doing the Real Talk sessions. And as Chevelle mentioned, we have the Activate in the Square event on March 4th. We're also continuing our weekly drop-in hours at Mattapan Station. So those are inside of Mattapan Station in the community room from 12 to 2 every Thursday through the end of March. You can find folks from BTD and MBTA, and often also folks from our Office of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion, as well as BPDA. So definitely stop by. Those are a great resource. We are working on getting those scheduled in Grove Hall. I am very hopeful that we'll have updates on that for you soon. We are just working through the final details of securing a space for that. We will continue these monthly public meetings through July. So as long as you are registered for today, you're registered for all of the meetings moving forward through July. These happen every fourth Tuesday from 6:30 to 8 p.m. So thank you all for joining tonight. We hope we'll see you at future ones as well. And then, as we've alluded to throughout our discussion tonight, we'll also be working on some bus rider surveys on the buses that travel along Blue Hill Avenue, business surveys to make sure that we're taking into account the needs of our many, many small businesses along this corridor along the avenue. And we will also be doing youth-focused learning and engagement workshops, as well as a very exciting interactive and informational exhibit that we will have more information to share with you on soon. And so with that, this is some information about how to stay connected. If you want to get in touch with me, you can call 617-635-3944. That comes directly to my desk phone. You can leave me a voicemail and I will make sure to get back to you. We also have our website where we have all of our current presentation materials, or you can always email us at bluehillab@boston.gov. If you have more questions that you want to make sure our team is seeing, you can let us know using this great form that Alyssa and her team at Powerful Pathways created for us. So with that, I am going to end the poll and open things up for the discussion portion of tonight's meeting. So if you are interested in asking a question, please feel free to raise your hand and we will try to get through as many folks as we can. We do like to end these meetings at 8 p.m. to be respectful of people's time. So I ask that you try to keep your question concise and also that you speak relatively slowly so that our interpreters have time to translate. So with that, is there anyone who would like to raise their hand to address some questions? And if not, we will also look through the chat too to pull. I noticed a couple questions in there. Okay. All righty. Looks like we'll start with the chat then. So there was a question about, can we send out monthly notices for these meetings earlier? Yes, we absolutely can. February snuck up on us a little bit, being a short month, but we try to get information out to you all through our newsletter at least twice a month to let you know about both this meeting and also the other work we're doing. As mentioned too, we were really thoughtful about trying to choose the exact same day and time each month so that it's easy for you to mark on your calendars, but we promise that we will also make sure that that is being shared as well. I see someone in the chat has also asked, are there plans for the triple parking at Talbot and Blue Hill Avenue? We have heard much about the double and triple parking that happens on that part of the corridor and are very aware that it's an issue. That will absolutely be a focus of both our parking studies so that we can start to quantify how bad of an issue it is. We know it is. We heard it from the bus operators that we spoke to as well. And then to look at sort of the surrounding area as well and begin to figure out what we can do in order to address those issues. So there are a wide range of strategies the city can draw on to help to address those issues, including, better timed parking spaces and regulations, enforcement, looking for other opportunities for people to do sort of like the run and drop off. So thank you so much for raising that to us again. Definitely we'll be talking about that block around Talbot and Blue Hill Avenue. What is the execution date of our plans? Great question about timeline. So the city of Boston received money from the federal government to help with this process. We received $15 million. According to that grant, we need to be looking for someone to construct the project by the end of September 2024. However, the city is committed to moving at the pace of community engagement and trust. So if we need to ask the federal administration for some more time in order to feel like we're sufficiently addressing community concerns, we will absolutely ask for that time, and we will keep you all updated if anything at all changes about that timeline. Let's see, we also have a question from JP in the chat. Will they keep the same number of lanes of traffic in the proposed changes on Blue Hill Avenue? Also a great question. So we are pre-design right now. We do not have a design concept for the corridor. We're really focused on having these conversations with folks. There is a very sketch design that was included in the grant application that we put in with the federal government, which we can give you all access to. But we are committed to putting this process first and letting the feedback that we receive inform whatever we propose as the design on the corridor. The city is interested in center running bus lanes as a concept, as we've stated before, considering that over half of people on the corridor during rush hours are on buses, and the sort of space efficiency of those buses. You can fit many more people on a bus in a smaller space than you can a car. We are interested in the reliability that center running bus lanes can provide and the travel time savings. While that is absolutely the opinion of the city, we are committed to not having the city's opinion override the guidance of community members. So I want to be really clear that while the city is in favor of center running bus lanes, we are not saying that that is for sure happening, or that that is the only way that a project on Blue Hill Avenue can happen. So I want to be really clear about that. And why I bring that up is because as we get into those conversations about what would it mean to have center running bus lanes, then we can get into conversations about, you know, number of lanes of traffic and having turning lanes and what that looks like for parking on a block by block basis. So we're committed to having those conversations. We're just not having them yet because we're still pre-design and we're still gathering feedback. So I don't have a direct answer for you, but hopefully that helps to answer your question. Let's see, Julio or Antonio, I think I will ask if one of you want to step in. There's a question for how many houses are proposed for the affordable houses?
Sure. Yeah, I can take that on. So I mentioned earlier in the presentation that we have 150 parcels that we're looking at. In our first RFP, we've prioritized 20 parcels, which are in the Dorchester area, very close to the Blue Hill Ave area. And we have not set limits on how many units we are looking at in those parcels. Each parcel has varying square footages ranging from 3,000 to 7,000 square feet. So in the RFP, which we will be releasing soon, we will be requesting developers to present how many units they think they can build on those parcels. So they can range from single family homes to 3-family. We are trying to shoot for as many units as we can. It's just hard to tell at this point.
Thank you so much, Antonio. And while you're here, I believe there was an earlier question as well about the income limits associated with low and moderate
Yes.
income. Could you just give a rough sort of estimation of what those are?
Yeah, it would be hard to give a rough estimate. I would advise folks to go to the various links that we provided in the chat. Welcome Home Boston also has links to the income limits. It really depends on your household size number and your income plus assets. So that would depend on what where do you rank on the percentages that we're looking for of residents to be homeowners? So I would advise for folks to go to those links and see where you fall. Again, we're looking, not everyone would qualify, I would say, for that. So just be mindful.
Thank you, Antonio. And Antonio or Julio, one more housing related question. Could you mention the program again about home buyer repairs? And Maya, could you put the link to that in the chat?
So just to add to what Antonio was saying, the income limits do change every year. So just be mindful of that. They have been going on for the last couple of years, but essentially HUD dictates what those numbers are since they provide a lot of our funding. I think somebody linked in the chat earlier, but there is maybe I can find it after this, but the income limits also includes the maximum sales price for a lot of the condos as well. I'm not sure if the Welcome Home Boston is using different sales prices. Maybe Antonio can speak to that, but the link includes income limits by household sizes for a number of different area median income ranges. And then you'll also see maximum sales prices as well. And I think Maya just posted it in the chat. But take a look at those. And then if you have any questions on your, if you qualify or not for these programs, I would say contact the Boston Home Center. That's the first stop in this process. They do the home buying classes, the credit building, financial assistance, down payment assistance. The Home Center is probably your best stop for learning about how to buy a home, or if you want to get repairs on your home if you own one.
Thank you so much, Julio. I will also, again, encourage people, raise your hand if you feel comfortable asking your question out loud. I'm sure not everybody wants to hear me drone on this whole time. So please, if you feel like speaking up, we'd love to hear from you. But for now, I'll keep going through some of the questions we're receiving by chat. So there's a question: has there been any discussion of implementing a parking benefit district along Blue Hill Avenue? So parking revenue goes directly into the community for more direct community priorities, such as local beautification, street improvements, and regular cleaning, etc. And there's also a link to a description of that benefit. So this is one element of what I forecasted when I said we're going to need to have a lot of discussions about parking. Right now, along the entire corridor, there is no paid parking. It is all, there are definitely regulations, but it is not paid. Asking folks to pay for parking is one form of, is one strategy, I guess you would say, that we can use to encourage turnover. So that graph you saw earlier tonight, where we're trying to get, more cars to be able to use the same spot. So increasing parking availability, even if we're not changing the number of spaces on the street. But we will have to talk more in depth with folks in the community about whether or not something like a parking benefit district is something that folks are even interested in. So hopefully that answers that question. Please always feel free to follow up by chat if I am not answering your question sufficiently. I did see that Andre had his hand raised. Andre, did you still want to ask a question? I will ask you to unmute just in case. There you go. Okay. Andre.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I just had one question, which is primarily who is in charge of enforcing parking in the first place? Is this the MBTA or is this the Boston Police Department?
So great question. And it's actually a third option. So most parking enforcement in the city happens through the Boston Transportation Department and our parking enforcement officers. So these are civilians, they are not police, who are deployed around the city and are tasked with looking at parking violations and such. There is a very specific I guess, legal distinction for what they can do, though. So Boston Transportation Department's parking enforcement officers are only allowed to ticket cars that are not moving. So folks who are, let's say, traveling in a bus lane or like traveling through a bus stop or something like that, our parking enforcement officers are not allowed to issue those folks tickets. They can only issue tickets to stationary vehicles. If we, with the current state laws, if we were to try to enforce vehicles that were actually moving, that would need to be done either by the MBTA transit police in areas where there's some sort of conflict with transit, or by the Boston Police Department. Great question. Okay. Not seeing any other hands, I'm going to go back to the chat. So there's a question of, could you speak to why the city is in favor of center running bus lanes or the central running bus lane? Absolutely. So for those of you who were able to attend our meeting in January, you heard about some of this. But one of the key things that we are trying to address that we've heard from folks is how do you expect people to choose the bus if they're not currently riding it, if it's not reliable? And the city and the MBTA both believe that a center running bus lane is the best type of infrastructure we can build in order to make the buses as reliable as possible for riders. Under the way the street is today, bus riders on Blue Hill Avenue collectively lose 3,056 hours per weekday due to traffic and delays. It's almost incomprehensible numbers when you try to put that into, what would that mean actually for the thousands of bus riders that are traveling here. It's time away from their families. It's more time they have to spend on the bus getting to and from work. And so center running bus lanes would remove buses from traffic, which we know would make them more reliable. Today, it can take anywhere between 15 and 25 or 30 minutes to get from Mattapan Square to Grove Hall on a bus. And with center running bus lanes, that trip would take 15 minutes every single time. It's something that people could count on. The other element of this is that the MBTA is planning to put more service on Blue Hill Avenue. But unfortunately, if buses are, weaving in and out of traffic, they're hitting bus stops that have parked cars in them or that kind of thing, that can slow buses down and cause them to bunch. So that's where you'll see multiple buses arriving at a stop together instead of at their scheduled time, however many minutes apart, 5, 10, 15. And so what that means is if our streets aren't designed to accommodate that increase in service, that actually won't translate to increased service for riders and for people who want to use the bus, because you'll see 2 buses come and then you won't see another one for 20 to 30 minutes. So depending where you are on Blue Hill Avenue under the new bus network redesign proposed by the MBTA, a bus will travel down Blue Hill Avenue every 2.7 to 6 minutes, depending on which part you're on and sort of how many routes are there. And then just as one more key statistic is that over about 20,000 people get on and off buses every day on this stretch of Blue Hill Avenue. So we're talking about a very large number of community members and other folks who are currently using the bus for transportation. And we think there's even more opportunity for people to use the bus if it's a service that they think they can count on. Okay. I know we have other questions. I don't see any other hands, so I assume you all want to continue hearing me talk, but we are getting a lot of messages. So let's see. Okay, one of the concerns I have is that they will slim lanes down like American Legion, causing more traffic as they increase residential units, like the complex by Wendy's on American Legion, Cummins Highway next to the commuter rail stop, and Mattapan Square across from Macumbas. Are they taking traffic into account? So yes, we are absolutely taking traffic into account. One of the reasons that we choose to, in some cases, reduce the number of lanes, and in particular, one of the reasons why some of my colleagues at the Boston Transportation Department worked on the American Legion project is because, unfortunately, on that stretch of road, speeding and drag racing were resulting in a loss of life. People were being killed because of how quickly folks were driving on that street. And so reducing lanes is one of the ways that we can help to slow people down, because then you're only going as fast as the car in front of you. I know that that can be frustrating when you're in a car and you're driving and it seems much slower than it did before, but there really is a core safety reason behind why we do some of those things. Now, I am by no means saying that, you know, we're going to take all of Blue Hill Avenue down to one lane each way tomorrow. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. But we do hear these sort of competing community priorities thus far about wanting to make sure that people feel safe traveling on Blue Hill Avenue, whether they're in a car or they're walking, and then also wanting traffic to flow. And so it's sort of a fine balance between those two things in terms of making sure that people are, you know, driving at a speed that is safe for themselves and others, and also making sure that we have free flowing traffic so people can get where they want to go and get where they want to go reliably, and not worry that when they hop in their car, it could take anywhere from, you know, 5 minutes to half an hour to an hour to get where they want to go down Blue Hill Avenue. Mr. Elisa, I see your hand is raised, so I'm going to ask you to unmute. Okay.
Thank you. I guess the question I'm going to ask you is basically the one that's been asked before. More than parking, which you say is the responsibility of traffic and parking, the traffic management is the issue. At what point do we engage the MBTA police and the Boston police in enforcement of Chapter 90? Since we know that the reason the buses do not flow properly is the lack of traffic management, people who double up the lights, you know, light coordination, things of that nature. At what point do we begin to engage the MBTA police and the Boston police who do traffic flow and traffic management in the discussion as to the improvements that might be made by a single line bus lane as opposed to better traffic management along Blue Hill Avenue?
Yeah, Mr. Lisa, thank you for your question. You're right, that is something that we hear about a lot. This is part of why we find it so important to be coordinating across departments, because as you mentioned, and across agencies, as you mentioned, those are all entities that are not within the Boston Transportation Department. But so we will be talking with folks, but we'll also be talking with everyone in this community on this call too, because there are other ways also to approach enforcement that don't necessarily have to involve having more police on the streets. And so we want to make sure that we're talking with people about all of the strategies we have available to make sure that people are traveling safely on Blue Hill Avenue, no matter how they choose to get around. And we want to be sensitive to the conversations that people want to make sure we have before we move forward with any particular strategy for enforcement. Reverend Culpepper, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Ooh, there we go.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
And so a couple of things. You know, I'd like to see that data, that study that you refer to regarding the deaths on American Legion Highway, because they're still doing it on American Legion Highway. The sad thing is that they're doing it in the lane to the right, that I'm not sure whether that's a bike lane. So trying to modify behavior by cutting down on the number of lanes hasn't worked in terms of cutting down on speeding and unsafe driving, which is more of an enforcement issue. But I also want to look at that study that you referred to. And then when you think about what it does to folks who live in the community in terms of that one lane going up American Legion Highway, it didn't seem like there was much balancing in terms of how do we balance the inconvenience of folks that are trying to get down American Legion Highway to get to work, back from American Legion Highway, to do the shopping, to go back and forth, versus this study that you referred to, that the folks who did the work on American Legion Highway didn't come to us the way we're having these discussions now. Same thing for Seaver Street. And when I drive on Seaver Street, and I live on Seaver Street, and I get to Seaver and Walnut to go down Columbus Ave, most of the time that bus lane is free. And so we're sitting there in these long lines of traffic, looking at the lane next to us that's free. And when you think about the way they cut back bus service, and you look at the bus lane, folks are trying to get up Columbus Ave, we look at the lane next to us, no one's in it. And so I raised a question at our last meeting about, has there been discussion about the Blue Hill Avenue project without having a dedicated bus lane, but improving traffic flow on Blue Hill Ave, even if there was a bike, even if there was another bike lane on the other side. Why is there this grip on the bus lane? Knowing that there's so much opposition, wouldn't it make sense to also have a plan to say, we're going to beautify Blue Hill Ave, we're going to improve bus flow, we're going to improve a way for businesses to have folks not double parking on Blue Hill Ave, but places where folks can park? Because I think that's what the community has been asking. What other options are there than to have a dedicated bus lane going down Blue Hill Ave, knowing that you got to fight, you got a real battle. We're going to be out in the street. If y'all try to put that bus lane there, we don't need that kind of fight, because we're telling you early on, there's a better way to do this than just ram down a bus lane down the middle of Blue Hill Ave, down our throats. There's a better way to do this. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be a dedicated bus lane. There can be bike lanes. There can be improved traffic flow where buses, when they are moving up and down Blue Hill Ave, can flow in a much smoother way. If you look at that island in the middle of Blue Hill Ave, and so there are modifications that can happen, but I think there has to be the will to say, we're listening to people say they're staunchly opposed to just taking another bus lane, doing what you did to American Legion Highway. And I don't agree with the reason why they did that was because of the deaths. And that's why I want to see that study that no one has seen yet. But I do think there has to be a mindset shift where folks are saying, we have such opposition. We want to beautify Blue Hill Ave so that folks who live in the area can enjoy it. The businesses will be less pressed for parking, and that we can make it a place where everyone wants to be happy, and not have a community upset like we are about Columbus Ave, Seaver Street, and Blue Hill Avenue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend Culpepper. I'm so glad that you sort of did exactly what Alensa talked about earlier in these conversations, which is just as important as what you don't want to see. And I hear you loud and clear that you have lots of concerns about a center-running bus lane and don't think it would be appropriate for Blue Hill Avenue. Just as important as hearing about those things you do want to see. So the beautification, the improvement to the sidewalks, making Blue Hill Avenue a really exciting place to be. I'm so appreciative you spoke up and expressed those things. I hope we can continue to hear from you and talk to you about those things that you think would help create that vision for Blue Hill Avenue, because I promise you all, I am committed to bringing to life the vision for Blue Hill Avenue that we hear about through our community engagement, both in this meeting and throughout all the other things we hear. So I appreciate that perspective. In terms of the data, Reverend, I'm happy to send you some of that, so I can contact you by email if that works, to make sure that you get that data. And then I'm happy to have a longer discussion too, if you'd like. So in the interest of time, I probably will leave most of the follow-up for our email communication, just because we are at 8 o'clock and we have a few more folks to get through. Councillor Fernandez Anderson, I see you have your hand raised, so I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Thanks, Christy.
Yes, thank you for coming.
Good evening, everyone. is it okay if I go after Jay?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Jay. Oh, sorry. I think I accidentally just muted you instead of asking to unmute. Apologies.
You actually sent me a unmute suggestion a little while ago, or somebody did. And nice job. You put the guy that doesn't live in the area and is going to advocate for center lane buses right after the Reverend. But you know, I wish there was a way to, like, you know, make everybody equally happy. But my dad used to always teach me that, you know, they came to a good deal when everybody's equally unhappy about it, but no one's more unhappy than anyone else. Yeah, I'm sorry. My name's Jay Flynn. I'm from Transit Matters. And for those of you who don't know what Transit Matters is, we are a transit advocacy and kind of think tank group. So yeah, I am a guy that doesn't live in your neighborhood telling you what's best for you. So I apologize for that. But you know, we've done a lot of research on what slows buses down and what makes them go faster. And you know, I mean, there are, if you look at like average time of commutes in Boston, that you know, I'll admit, I used to live in Central Square. Central Square usually got fairly quick service, although I remember many times getting frustrated because 3 Route 1 buses in a row were all trying to all following each other. But you know, there is a canyon going in between, like, basically Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan, where people are taking twice as much time to go to work, and a higher percentage of people are driving. And that's because for 100 years, the T has neglected that area. You know, everybody else has quick, relatively efficient, although not so much lately if you read the papers. But you know, they have trains, they have Green Line, whereas the buses just can't move as fast in traffic. And you know, I wish there was another way other than dedicated bus lanes to do that. But you know, we got to leave our kids a better world than we have now. And getting more people to take buses requires they be fast and efficient and reliable. And unfortunately, the best way of doing that is center running bus lanes. I would love to look at any research that anybody has done that shows something else that works as well. You know, and you know, we at Transit Matters would be happy to come chat with a neighborhood group, whether it be a neighborhood advocacy group, churches, anybody. We'll at least Zoom call anybody and be happy to chat with you about alternatives. And
Thank you for that, Jay.
you're welcome. And Kirsty, we all love your voice. You can talk as much as you want.
I'm not sure everybody agrees with that, but thank you very much. I am going to keep things moving though, because I want to make sure we get to everyone, and we are past 8 p.m. and I want to be respectful of people's time. So Councillor Fernandez Anderson, back to you.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you for facilitating this listening session. I guess I have a few questions. One is of this meeting, are we keeping track of who's attending, who is from the city, who are consultants, who are engineers, separate from the numbers of actual community residents? And
Yes.
then, great.
Sorry, quick answer. Yes.
So, although I appreciated Jay's apology, it is important to separate, to understand that we actually have residents that are advocating. And that question was posed in my head before your question, before your comment, Jay. So nothing to do with you. But also then the other part of it is I heard Stephen mention something about figuring out the number of people that are I guess traveling through Blue Hill Avenue in comparison to the residents that are actually commenting and involved. And so that you could see the trouble with that, right? You could see that it does feel sort of this, is this the gentrification, transit architecture coming in our neighborhood? And what does that mean? That people that come through are important because they need to get through their jobs that pay more than our jobs, or is it more important to prioritize the residents? So that's a question. And then, of course, I would like, real understanding of if everything is going to be, and I like the in-person, and I like the door-to-door. I think you guys are doing a really good job. I just wonder if we're doing everything that we need to do to involve our residents, because out of this meeting alone, when you go through this list, and half of the people here are not, they don't appear to be actual residents. So I just would make sure that we are careful about that and making sure that communities' voices are uplifted. I don't necessarily have a position either way. I'm interested in listening and helping this process in whatever way that we can be practical and effective, but also that we're very careful. And when we say equity and intentionality, that we are tracking, responses by demographics, by residents, that we do publicize it. And I just don't see that in this meeting. So I would just make sure that, when we are coming to our decision making and we're looking at numbers and we're comparing, as Stephen was doing, that we're very careful in not blaming the victim. If they don't have access, if people don't have access to these meetings, or if residents are not showing up every meeting, what does that mean? If even with the polls, are we also tracking by demographics and residents with the people that are responding to the polls as well?
Thank you, Councilor Fernandez-Anderson. So to talk about a few of the things you answered. So yes, we are, that's part of why we ask our intro poll at every meeting too, is so that we can distinguish, sort of who are residents along the corridor, who are people who might be joining us from the broader Boston community. And we are able to track that sort of like anonymized, but across people's poll answers, so that we can break out responses by folks who live close to the corridor versus those who don't. And you're absolutely correct that that's something really important, and we promise to continue sort of trying to track those statistics. In terms of your question about, how do we weigh the different feedback that we're getting and that sort of thing. I think, part of what we have focused on is just really trying to get to folks that we often don't hear from in forums like this. So that's why we mention, folks with young families, people who live in public housing, seniors, bus riders, because we often don't see them show up as much in meetings. So we want to make sure that we're getting a really broad representation of feedback from across the community. And also part of why we're excited about Real Talk is because it offers an opportunity to really get into the the deep context of the lives behind those voices that we're hearing from, and making sure that in those meetings too, we're hearing from people who travel Blue Hill Avenue by all different modes, driving, transit, walking, biking, to make sure that those voices are uplifted and represented in everything we do. We are working on a comprehensive way to track the feedback we're getting. We're engaging people in a lot of different ways, so we're still trying to figure out the best way to have that in one comprehensive spreadsheet. But once we're diving more into that, and we promise to keep you all updated and to, you know, continue reporting back about what we're hearing and what we're doing. Part of why we are trying to do this process in this way is so that the decisions that we make about engagement can be guided in partnership with community. And so that's something we're continually working towards. It's a moving target. We'll continue reporting back on how that's going, and please continue to hold us accountable. And we will be working on more in-person engagement soon. But that is absolutely, thank you for highlighting that. That is somewhere where we can continue to do more. And then I'm unmuting you, Counselor, just in case you had any follow-ups.
I guess just in terms of, you know, the comments overall, like when you're prioritizing people that are transporting themselves back and forth and through Blue Hill Avenue, you can understand sort of, you know, the historical context here, the lack of faith in government that this community faces. I think that we are saying we are not just a place for you to travel through. To Jay's point, for example, he made a salient point about over hundreds of years and forever being ignored. What does that mean? It means that folks who are not coming into Mattapan, Dorchester to advocate for higher jobs or for human life or, you know, violence prevention, all of these other things that prioritize Black and Brown bodies. And so it's also important for us to have the conversation transparently about how this impacts the community. So when if you're doing a thing like transit, the conversation should be, you know, partnering with other types of resources. To Alenza's and Jay's point, I guess, is to build out this, you know, business corridor in a way that it's inviting, but also looking at other community benefits that are coming our way, so that we can revitalize this area, that we can, you know, by way of arts or uplifting and sidewalk improvements and all of that. So I think we want to see a conversation about where is the money going to come from to actually revitalize these businesses all the way through the corridor. And then also the conversation about, you know, just the disparity and the history behind it is important, because we can't have reconciliation or any type of collaboration unless we partner in truth. So I would just encourage the conversation to be very transparent and open about the harm so that we can talk about moving forward. And I think that's a more healthy way of moving forward, as opposed to just saying, here's a great thing, it's good for you. I'm not from here, I think it's good for you, but rather, here's the harm. Now we're late, but better late than never. But how do you invest in equity and the businesses in and around the area? And I look forward to talking more with you, Christy, because I know that those are your priorities as well. And anyone who is interested, especially with the White Stadium being proposed to change, there are other things going around that we could look at resources to do better with Blue Hill Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilor Anderson. And so we have our sort of final feedback of the night. I know it's 8:15. Thank you, those of you who are able to stay on. Maddie and Zach, I am now asking you to unmute.
Thanks. It's just Zach. We're one of those young families who are trying to put the kids down and can never make meetings like this. But no matter when they're scheduled, they just can't fit it in really. You know, but we live in Eggleston Square, and we, you know, mostly get around the city without a car. Our life is, you know, largely organized utilizing city services and patronizing businesses and accessing things up and down Blue Hill Avenue and in Mattapan and Roxbury, Dorchester, and then where we live, JP and Eggleston. It's just, I just want to say that like it's a lot of people who aren't in a car are often like invisible because they just take up less space physically. So like just like looking out on the street, like when 20 cars are queued at a red light, and it's very frustrating for everybody to go through like 2 red light cycles and not get through the intersection. You see it like across the city, like every day, just like people not getting through. It's, visually that was like, oh my God, look at this traffic. But on one bus, you could have 30 people. You could have 30 people in those cars. That's going to go 7 blocks. You have 30 people on one bus that only doesn't take up that much space. It doesn't look like there's that many people impacted, but we're impacted too, and we bike with the kids, and in a lot of places it just doesn't feel safe. Some of the restaurants and stuff we used to go to on Blue Hill Ave, we don't go to really since our kids were born because we don't feel safe biking over there. We can't, and we just opt for something that's easier to get to, so just want to like say, it's like people who aren't in cars also have places to be and jobs to get to and kids to get to school, and we just don't take up as much space, so sometimes we're not visible. The road, the way it's designed, like it's easy for us to just not be seen, or like for people, and I drive sometimes too, so like I understand what how frustrating it is to get around Boston, but yeah, we just want to like say that we're out here, and we look forward to being able to enjoy our neighborhood and adjacent neighborhoods more often and better, without having to worry about getting hit by a car that's running through a red light or trying to get around a triple parked block. Just the kind of the chaos that currently exists. It's really we'd love to see it change sooner rather than later. Thanks for hearing us out.
Thank you for your comment. And thank you to everybody who came tonight. One of the things that I so appreciate about these communities that Blue Hill Avenue touches is that folks really do take the time to get involved, and we couldn't do this without you. So thank you for staying with us a little bit late tonight. We really appreciate it. I hope that we'll see you at future meetings. As always, if you have questions, if you have concerns, I'm available to chat with anybody. You can reach me at the phone number listed previously or by email. I really do want to make sure that this is a community-led process, so I can always make myself available. And with that, thank you everybody so much. Have a great rest of your Tuesday night, and hopefully we will see you all soon.